represent Jesus. But the title of today's message is Don't Hate, Let Love Permeate. I'll repeat that. Today's title is Don't Hate, Let Love Permeate. Right? So for this message, we're going to be walking through the book of 1 John, and we're going to be identifying the character of Jesus and the characteristics of being a follower of Christ. So the first verse I'll give you is 1 John chapter 2, verse 9 through 11, that says, anyone who claims to live in God's light and hates a brother or sister is still in the dark. It's the person who loves their brother or sister who dwells in God's light and doesn't block the light from others. But whoever hates is still in the dark, stumbles around in the dark, doesn't know which end is up, blinded by the darkness. So what this is talking about is if you are a follower of Christ, which we all should be here today, you shouldn't have hate in your heart for anyone. You shouldn't have resentment for anyone. I can give a personal example of that. I had a friend when I was entering my freshman year of high school. We were best friends all through middle school and elementary school. And he had gone on a vacation the summer going into our freshman year. And what came back with him was an addiction to vaping and smoking weed. Once this became noticeable to me, I confronted him about it, and he seemed rather, for lack of a better word, indifferent to how I was feeling about it. The fact that I was not going to support that, the fact that I was not going to participate in that kind of activity, and it hurt me because it cost us our friendship, and it seemed like it really didn't bother him. And it actually became such a big thing to a point where everyone in the school that did that kind of thing, like vaping, smoking, when they wanted to get those products, they went to him. They went through him. So immediately our friendship had to cut off, and it hurt. And honestly, I hated him. However, this hate that I was feeling in my heart eventually started to backfire on me because it trickled into the kind of person I was becoming. The interactions I was having with others, it was not pleasant. I was disrespectful to my parents. I was dishonorable to the ones that I loved, those that I interacted with. It wasn't good for them because it wasn't fair that they were being treated rudely because of the hate that I was feeling in my heart for a separate issue. So eventually I had to come to terms with the situation and forgive my friend in my heart, which I'll talk about more in a second. However, when we look at this type of message, we learn that when we talk about loving somebody, it's a sacrificial type of kindness. I'll give you a verse that supports that. Colossians chapter 3, verse 12 states, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. So before I get more into the story about my friend, there's 3 points about love that I'd like to give you, with the first one being love freely forgives. Another verse, the very next verse after that, it says Colossians chapter 3, verse 13, don't get upset with each other. If somebody does something bad to you, don't do payback to them. Remember that God doesn't do payback to you for the bad things that you do, so don't do payback to other people. Getting back to my story about my friend, eventually I had to forgive him. I saw that he was not going to change. There was nothing I could say or do to convince him to not do that, which I felt was ruining his life. But eventually, in my heart, I forgave him, and I told him that I forgive him for costing us our friendship and leading a life that I knew was not good for him. And eventually, as time went on, years went on, we were able to rekindle our friendship. But in the end, I forgave him because I had love in my heart. I allowed Christ and his example of love and forgiveness and grace to be illuminated through me in that situation, and I forgave my friend. Moving into the second point of love, it says love displays empathy. So the example I'd like to give that supports this point is the parable of the Good Samaritan, found in Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 37. So if you look in the image here, there's a man laying down. He is a Jewish man, right? So parables were the stories that Jesus used to make points about different lessons during his time when he was living. So this parable is called the Good Samaritan. So Jesus is talking about a Jewish man who was traveling. He was going somewhere on a journey, and he had a lot of things with him, goods and all that. And it was an 18-mile distance. Now, I don't know about some of you, but 18 miles is a really long walk, whether you're running or walking. So he was very tired. It got to a point. But along his way throughout his travels, a group of thieves confronted him and felt that it would be a good idea to take his belongings and jump him. So that's exactly what they did. They beat him nearly to his death, and they stole all of his things that he had, and they just kept going. So in the aftermath, the man is left there on the side of the road, nearly beaten, with nothing left. And there are 3 individuals who come across him and do something about it. The first being a priest. Now, back in that day, a priest was someone who had a close connection with God. It was someone that people went to so that they could communicate with God. And so it would be assumed that this priest would have at least shown some type of sympathy or empathy for the man when going past him, right? Well, that's not what happened. The priest saw him, noticed him for a second, and continued on going down the path where the man was going before he got beaten up and all of his things taken. The priest just goes right past him, does nothing to help him, right? The second individual that comes across is a Levite. So a Levite back in that day was someone who wasn't exactly a priest, but it was someone who's heavily involved in the church. They helped around the church. They were involved with liberating the community of the church, right? So again, it would be assumed that someone like that would have at least stopped what they were doing to show some type of help and support to the man who was beaten on the side of the road. Well, surprise, surprise, he didn't do anything either. He looked at him for just about a second and then kept going with what he was doing, had no remorse or anything like that. But then there's a third person that comes along. And this is the ironic part of the parable because this third person is a Samaritan. So back in that day, the group of people called the Samaritans and the Jews did not associate. They didn't get along. They did not go together. So if a Samaritan saw a Jewish person, they would usually go the other way because they did not agree with each other. However, when this third person comes along and sees the man on the side of the road, as you look in this image here, the man helping him is the Samaritan, and the man being helped is the Jewish man. So he heals his wounds, he takes care of him, he helps him get back on his feet, he leads him to a hospital where they take care of him and recover him, and the man pays for his recovery, right? Now that's ironic. That's something that no one probably could have thought of. But the point of this message is to show that the man displayed empathy for the Jewish man. Yes, he was a Samaritan. Yes, he was different than him in probably every way. But he saw that he was in need of help and service. And so through love, he displayed empathy for him. But looking at that, a lot of you may think, what does the word empathy exactly mean? So I'll give an example. Let's say you and I, since I plan to be a naval officer soon, let's say you and I are on a boat, and we're on the port, and we're at the balcony, and we're just looking out in the middle of the sea, and we see someone literally drowning. There's no shore, there's no area for them to maybe swim to, and they're just in the middle of the ocean drowning, begging for their life. How would you feel about that if you saw that? You would probably feel sympathy for them. You would feel really bad for them, for their situation. Probably thinking of yourself if you were in that situation, how scared, how dreadful the environment would be. That's sympathy. Empathy is the application of that sympathy. So that's me and you getting off the boat, attached to some type of life support thing. I'm not sure how it works, but swimming out there, saving the man, and bringing him back. That would be empathy. That is the application of your sympathy. So again, I refer back to this image because it's just perfect. This man is showing empathy through applying his love and kindness for the man because he sees he's in need of help. He didn't have to ask. He didn't have to do any. There was no other pre-things that he needed to know about him. He helps him out because he sees that he's in a place of need through love because he has love in his heart. So yeah, the priest and the Levite walking by, they're great. They've got good titles, but they clearly didn't have love in their heart. And so they were not truly following the Lord as what we are called to do as followers of Christ. You may not like everyone you encounter. They may not like you. It may be very obvious. But if there's someone in need, if there's an opportunity where you can help somebody with love, we should all be doing that as followers of Christ. So the third and last point that I'd like to give all of you is love gives grace. So I'm going to give another example. This one is about me. So in 7th grade, I had this teacher named Mr. Hansen. And he was beloved for some reason. I didn't know why. In middle school, I was very not involved with what was going on, especially with the curriculum and clubs and stuff. I just wanted to go to school and go home. That was really it. So when I got to that class, Mr. Hansen, everybody loves him, having a great time. I was like, whatever. So our first test came for the year, and it was mentioned throughout the year a little bit or whatever, but I was just not really picking up on it. I wasn't the best student. So when the exam date came, I was not prepared. And I guess it was very obvious to Mr. Hansen because he looks at me, he pulls me to the side, and he goes, Mark, I see that you have not studied for this exam. I know that you haven't. So I'm going to give you another day to study. So you don't have to take the exam while everyone else does. You can just sit in the back and just do whatever. So I was like, great, thank you. Because yeah, no, you're right. I did not study for this exam. So thank you. Right, so I sit in the back, do whatever, go home, it's fine. Now, tell me why the next day comes and I still have not studied for this exam. And somehow, Mr. Hansen knows this. He sees this yet again. So he's like, Mark, he pulls him to the side, he's like, Mark, I know you didn't study for a second time. So I'm going to give you another chance to study for this exam. Now, at this point, I'm like, man, I have really squandered this opportunity, this kindness that Mr. Hansen is showing me to study for this exam multiple times, when the first time I should have just taken it and failed it already, just like everyone else had the chance to do as well. No one else was showed any special treatment like that but me. So yes, I took that next opportunity to study the next day, and I got an A on the test, and I moved along with the class swimmingly. However, my point in bringing up this example is that Mr. Hansen gave me grace. He barely knew me, the year was just beginning, but he saw me in a moment of weakness. He saw that I was not prepared for this exam, and that if I did take it, I was going to fail, and probably nothing was going to change from there. But under his leadership and authority, as he was the leader of the class, and we all under his wing were under his authority, he took that opportunity in my moment of weakness to meet me where I was and display kindness and love and empathy, which left an effect on me where I started reciprocating those characteristics of grace and love to others around me as well because of his example. So the key here is he gave me grace, which was a blessing that I didn't deserve. But more importantly, it's about the grace that Jesus Christ displays for us every single day of our lives when we sin and we ask for forgiveness and we repent. So now I'm going to conclude with moving into our call to action. So today, I would like to challenge all of you to love someone this week. Go out and find ways that you can love someone. Examples of this are being kind to others, honoring your parents, handling your responsibilities, having a kind word for someone. If you see someone sitting alone, maybe during lunch, or just an area where you see someone is alone and suffering in silence, include them in your social group. Reach out to them. These are ways that you can show love for others. But the big question here is, why should we love others? Why should we show this love? Well, that theme has kind of been repeated throughout this series, this sermon that I'm giving now, but I'll repeat it yet again. It is about the greatest act of love that has ever been shown for us through Jesus Christ crucified and resurrected 3 days later. A verse that helps support this is, but God showed his great love for us by sending Christ to die for us while we were still sinners. Yes, Christ was beaten, tortured, and then crucified. And even while he was on the cross, he was praying for you and I and everyone there, the people who hated him, who were torturing him. He prayed for us so that God would forgive us, because clearly we did not know what we were doing. They were murdering the Messiah, and they had no idea. Let that sink in. So that act of love should be enough for all of us to say, who are we to not show love to the person at school that doesn't like me? Who am I to not show love to the person that I just don't like? I don't really get along with this person. Who are we? Right? So before I conclude, I'd like to reiterate the 3 points of love that were displayed throughout this sermon. And let that resonate throughout this week. So the first point was love freely forgives. If you have love in your heart, which we all should, you should be forgiving everyone. It may not be easy, it may take time and prayer, but at some point you need to forgive with love in your heart. The second point is love displays empathy. Through the example given with the Good Samaritan, when you love someone, no matter what's going on, when you have love in your heart, you show empathy, especially if there's an opportunity where you can show it and help someone. And the last point, love gives grace. So it doesn't matter what happens against you or if there's an inconvenience, love gives grace. Have grace for others. And so to conclude, the big idea for today is demonstrate your faith by loving people so you can be an example of the love of God. And just a quick explanation of that, demonstrating your faith by loving people so you can be an example of the love of God, that means through loving others, people will see that, and that's how you demonstrate your faith being your following of Christ to others. So people will eventually catch on. They'll see, they're like, why is this person so nice? Why are they so kind? Why does it seem like nothing ever gets to them? They'll confront you about it. And at that point, then you can share the gospel. Then you can share Jesus. Then you can share your reason for loving, for being kind. And hopefully that draws them in. So I'll reiterate the big idea. Demonstrate your faith by loving people so you can be an example of the love of God. Thank you.